So welcome everyone. As you can see, we brought our chairs out front because we really are more interested in having a conversation and a discussion about the property tax elimination issue rather than telling you. We really would like to hear from you. Nobody likes property taxes. We all know that. But I think that my concern, and I believe the concern of many of the board members who are here, and if you've taken a look at the fact sheet, I think one of the things that you will see right away is I think our concern is more about the proposed plan that has been in the House and the Senate, which we do not believe is adequate in terms of funding all of the wonderful things that we currently have in our school district. I hope that you, like me and our board members, are proud of the accomplishments in our district and the many wonderful things that we have here that we're able to offer to our students. Our hope, obviously, is to be able to continue to do that while continuing as well to be fiscally efficient and responsible, which is always one of our main goals and our number one priority whenever we do our budgeting, whether it's the preliminary budget that we submit in January, February, or whether it's our final budget that we put out in June. We've got an excellent track record over the past 10 years of maintaining a level amount of tax increases that actually have been the lowest in the past 5 years during the time period of approximately 13 years. So we're working very hard towards that end. But on the other hand, we also recognize that we want to be able to provide a very competitive education to our student citizenry and ensure that they have what they need, all of our students, in order to be able to leave us and go on out into the world. So you should have here a fact sheet. They're over for those of you who are coming in. They're over on the table. If we don't have enough, we can certainly, thank you, Chuck. We will make some additional copies for you. And we really do thank you for coming out tonight. We're going into our interim board meeting after we have this discussion. It's a very quick, short board meeting. You're certainly welcome to stay for that as well. But as you'll see, if you take a look at the fact sheet, there are really a couple of major considerations. The proposal to eliminate property taxes, of course, sounds really terrific. As I said before, nobody likes paying their property taxes, especially if they consider them to be high. And we recognize that there are certainly people who have limited or fixed incomes, and this is certainly an issue. We hear it all the time, certainly from our senior citizens and from other members of the community as well. What we're very concerned about, however, though, is that the current plan that has been put before the Senate and the House calls for increases in other taxes, namely the personal income tax as well as the state sales tax. We're concerned about those because we believe they're unreliable sources and they can't guarantee a certain level of revenue for the school system. Property taxes, although we don't like them, are a very stable source of revenue upon which we are very highly dependent in our school district. Over 85% of the revenue that we take in the district actually comes from property taxes. So as you can understand, the thought of not having that revenue and not being absolutely guaranteed that we will get back from the state. This is the same state that has notoriously not been able to pass a budget on several occasions. Is very frightening to us because that possibility that the budget will not be passed in many years to come looms ahead of us. So that's certainly one concern. Secondly, personal income tax and state sales tax can fluctuate depending upon individuals' personal incomes as well as their spending habits. And in the case of a recession and a downturn in the economy, obviously that can significantly impact what comes into the state's coffers. We don't know as of yet, because it has not been well defined, how the state will disperse these funds to the individual school districts, when they will disperse the funds to the individual school districts, or even how much of these funds they will disperse to the individual school districts. And as I said, the greatest fear is that in times of economic downturn, if the funds aren't coming in at the level they may be coming in today, we may suffer. So I think I'm going to now keep quiet and offer either my board members or any of you in the audience to comment on any of the matters that I've just spoken about, or any of the information that's on the fact sheet. Certainly, if you'd like to comment or ask any questions. We're not experts on this. We just know the information that we've gotten from numerous sources throughout the state, including our professional associations, the School Business Managers Association, the Association of School Administrators, and other organizations which are very, very concerned about this, primarily because, again, we want to really maintain and keep programming in our schools at the level it is now. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening. We actually really appreciate seeing you all here. One other point that struck me when I am reading about this property tax elimination is that property tax elimination is really a fallacy. Because if you see in one of our bullet points here, residents and districts with existing debt prior to December 2016 will continue to pay property taxes on that debt, plus higher PIT and SUT taxes, which could be as high as 15% to 100% of their current property tax bill. So in addition to having your personal income tax raised and your sales tax raised, in a district like ours that does have debt service, you're still going to be paying property taxes. So it's a little bit of a fallacy.
And that's, of course, in addition to all of your other taxes, municipal, county, and so forth. So yes, that's absolutely a concern. There still will be other taxes in addition to the PIT and the sales tax as well. Anyone else? James? Mr. Taylor, one of our board members, is actually our local expert on property tax elimination. He's really been doing his homework and has been researching this issue. So, James, I know I just put you on the spot, but I'm going to turn this over to you.
I've been keeping an eye on this since it first came around, and back in 2012, 2013, I think is when it was first brought up. And there's been many reports that have been put out that all stress the same thing, that this is not, the proposal is not going to be able to support the school system the way it's written. One of the ones that's cited is from the Independent Fiscal Office, and a lot of people believe that this is actually showing that it works, but I've read through the document today, as a matter of fact, because I finally found it, and they actually say, no, it does not work. In their main summary, they say that the proposal has a negative net fiscal impact over the subsequent 4 years of the contained in the forecast. And basically what that means, if this was enacted back when it was supposed to be in 2014, that right now we'd be running a $1 billion deficit towards education. That funds would just not be there. So that was one thing that struck me. The other places that have spoken out against this have been the PA Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. They've all done their own research in it and have come up with the same conclusions, that this type of policy right now just doesn't work, and there needs to be either revisions to the system or just some changes to make it work better. So. Questions?
So what is your thought on this passing?
Well, we're here today to hopefully get the word out so everybody does call the representatives and let them know that we don't want this to pass. It's a bad idea for public education in Pennsylvania.
So how can parents help?
Just by calling your representatives and your the senators in the state and let them know that if HB 76 or Senate Bill 76 come up, to vote no on it.
And it's the same number bill in both the House and the Senate. So it's 76. 76 in both. And excuse me, John. As Mr. Taylor mentioned, what we have heard time and time again, and I know I hear this all the time at my superintendent's meetings, and I hear it as well from the legislators whenever we meet with them. We meet with them approximately twice a year, sometimes even more, a minimum of twice. One is at the legislative breakfast, and some of the board members actually appear with us at the legislative breakfast, where we have an opportunity to actually sit down and break bread with many of our local legislators and really talk to them about issues of concern that are coming up within the legislature. The other area is at a superintendent's conference that I go to on a yearly basis in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where we actually have a number of the legislators come in and meet with all of the Montgomery County superintendents. And the one thing that they have told us time and time again is that by and large, the senators and the House members don't really care very much what we, meaning the administrators, have to say. But they care deeply about what you have to say because you're the folks that elect them. And they're fearful of not being elected again if they can't satisfy the populace. So what we have heard over and over again from the legislators is that when people are unhappy or dissatisfied about an issue, the best way to make your voice heard and the best way for them to get the message is to flood their offices with emails and with phone calls. Yes, Sean. Oh, I'm sorry, Sean.
Where is it in the House and Senate? Like, where, do you have a gauge of the urgency or how far it's going to be voted on? Or?
Yeah, at first we were led to believe it was going to pass sometime in February, and then it stalled in the beginning of February. We know there's still active talk about it, but we don't have any new dates coming up yet that we've been made aware of. James, I don't know, you're keeping track of all this. I don't know if you've heard of any.
I have information about that, actually.
Okay.
My husband emailed with Steve McCarter's office today. It's actually not introduced yet, and it's not going to be number 76. That was last year's number, the one that got defeated. The email from his communication director says it's still not officially introduced. There's a memo of intention to introduce, imagining it will be introduced when Senate reconvenes the week of March 20th.
Hopefully
that's helpful.
That is wonderful information. Thank you so much.
We'll have a new number when it does get reintroduced.
Here's the concern. The concern is, depending upon how much support there is, it can get introduced quickly, voted on, and pushed through very, very fast. So we all have to keep our eyes on it and make sure that we're really following this. If March 20th is the about date, we need to really watch and make sure. And I think between now and then is really the ideal time. And my recommendation, I've only included our local legislators on here, but you can call all over Eastern or the entire Montgomery County area and call folks and say, look, I'm a tax-paying resident of the state of Pennsylvania, and I want you to know how I feel about this. You don't have to restrict your calls and your emails to just the folks on the list. Yeah.
To clarify, she says it's referred to as the Property Tax Independence Act Bill.
Property Tax Independence Act Bill. Boy, is that horse of a different color in terms of the name. Let me just get, yeah. Yeah, Steve, thank you, Gretchen. Gretchen just reminded me it's important to let you know that both Steve McCarter and Art Haywood are very much against this particular proposal. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I mean, it's okay.
Everybody's right behind one another.
I was wondering if you are in contact with other school administrations in other parts of the state that might be having similar meetings, because I had actually already called Senator Haywood and Congressman McCarter, and I was aware that they were opposed, but because of the demographics of our representatives in Harrisburg, it seems like it'd be really beneficial if people in other parts of the state realize how terrible this would be for their
And that's exactly what we're hearing. I mean, there are different implications for this depending upon where you are in the state. For example, the large farm owners have a vested interest in this, obviously. But here in this part of the state, where the 6 counties have the most significant amounts of business, and business pays property taxes. So there are more corporations in this portion of the state. That means more businesses are contributing to the property taxes and helping to fund, obviously, the school systems, and they're providing a significant amount of revenue. We have, is it 12% coming into Springfield Township from business? Approximately 12%. And ours is low compared to Wissahickon, for example. You may have been reading about them in the news. Their superintendent has commented on that. So there are different implications in different parts of the state as well. But what we know is the 6-county area right here, Delaware, Bucks, and Philadelphia, Montgomery, and so forth, we will suffer the most as the result of this. Yeah, Ken?
That's the other point about the tax shift. Businesses are no longer going to be paying property tax. So that money is going to be made up from somewhere. And it's not all going to be made up from the businesses paying their share of PIT and the sales and use tax. In fact, I've seen numbers statewide that say about $3 billion will be short statewide when the commercial and the businesses no longer pay property tax. I've seen numbers that say approximately $1 million of that will be made up when businesses have to pay the state tax and the PIT. So the other $2 billion has to come from somewhere, which will be individuals. Because as I understand it, once they figure out how much they need, it's going to be dollar for dollar, at least for the first year, maybe. After that, we're not sure what the allocation methodology is going to be. We're not going to sure what they do if recession hits and there's not enough money. We're not sure what they're going to do if there's any more mandates that come down, and whether they're going to fully fund those or not. Also, if you're a renter that lives in the district, you're going to have an increased tax with no property tax reduction. That's a problem. I've also seen numbers where the federal government has gotten, will get, a $600 million raise. That's the amount of exemptions, property tax exemptions, PA state individuals will lose. So the federal government's going to make out. So all of these things are troubling.
I just wanted to add one thing to that real quick. So the distributions are supposed to go into this new education stabilization fund, and it sounds like it's being kept separate, but the problem is that it's actually going to be lumped under the general fund for Pennsylvania, where transportation and many other items have their hands in the pocket, so to speak. And I did read up, there's supposed to be a certain percentage every year that's allocated to almost like a trust that's in there as well. So along with what you said, the first year, it still wouldn't be full funded back to the school districts because they have to set aside certain funds as well. So I just wanted to make that point.
Can you talk about construction and the debt impact? Future construction.
Part of the law states that any debt, bonds that we issue, which we typically issue for major capital improvements, repairs to the buildings, new schools, whatever, anything issued initially, they said after December 2016, will have to go to referendum, which means we'd have to take it out to you, to the public, the taxpayers of Springfield Township, to approve it. Then there's, if you do, then there's an increase in income tax. I don't think they mean the PIT, because there's really no way for us, the board, or anybody, to say, all right, you're a PA resident living in Springfield Township, you're paying a different state tax rate than everybody else. So it's going to have to be a local earned income tax in order to fund that. Which, let's say everything is rosy and everybody agrees and, hey, yes, raise my taxes. Again, the problem still is, if we sit down in a point in time and decide it has to go up, whatever it is, 0.2%, to raise enough money to fund what we intend to do. The following year, that 0.2% might not raise the revenue that we thought we did. So it's going to be very challenging as far as how do we keep the schools improved? How do we maintain the schools? The budget process is going to be a nightmare because we're not sure, like even for 17, 18, if this goes through, we're not sure when and if it does, how much. So, so budgeting is kind of iffy. And that's probably going to continue unless the state changes their timelines for budgeting. That's going to continue to be a problem moving forward. How much and when? Because right now, most of the property taxes that are collected between July and October. So that money then is rolled out and invested throughout the year. So interest income is going to go down. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at and thoroughly vetted before we just go ahead and say, hey, this is a great idea, let's go ahead and do it.
I just want to point out, if you go on the Pennsylvania General Assembly website, the Senate is reconvening on the 20th, but the House is reconvening on the 13th. You said it's in both, right?
It wasn't, when it was 76, it was in both.
But now it's just in the Senate? Or
I don't know.
It all depends on who introduces the bill,
Yeah.
because the way my understanding of the Pennsylvania legislature works is when one side introduces the bill and it gets approved there, then it goes over to the other side for revisions. Then it could either go back, or if it passes through both, then it would go to the governor, for final approval if it went that far. And one of the major things we need to be aware of right now is that Governor Wolf was at a meeting, I believe it was 2 weekends ago, and has made a statement that he is now willing to entertain to sit down with the legislature on this tax bill, which is bad news. Before he was against it, but now he's slowly changing and giving the signals that he is not as against it as he used to be.
So we need to call him too.
So call him too.
One that we can contact because our representatives are already against it.
Your
Right.
local-
You can, the local, yes. So you can call any of the other state senators and reps you want to in the state. And the PSBA, actually on their website, if you look up for the Pennsylvania school tax relief, they do have a list of all the new senators that you can call and everything else, who to notify that you're against this bill.
What was that website? I'm sorry.
What was that?
The website?
It's the PSBA.org site. It's the Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania School Boards Association. I think there's another PSBA organization, so make sure it's school boards. Yes.
So, some of the bullet points talk about the control of the school districts will be greatly reduced. Does that mean that the appropriations that the state will provide based on this bill would also come with some guidance or some dictation of what you can use the money for?
That's a great question, and again, based on prior experience in working with the state, I don't think it would surprise any of us if there was, and guidance is a lovely word to use, on how to spend the money and where that money should be appropriated. So it wouldn't surprise me if it came with strings attached, and that's part of our concern, is that, we've always had local control, and, the beauty part about the board sitting beside me is that they've made some very judicious decisions about things that our children in this district need. And the concern is that while Ken mentioned a number of state mandates that are out there that we're obligated to provide funding for, that there will be more mandates without subsequent funding, or that we will be directed on how to spend the money once it's diverted to us from the state coffers. So that's an excellent point. I think
I had one follow-up.
Yeah.
So as far as the governor's vote or veto on this bill, it's also my understanding that they may have enough support to override a veto because there is a supermajority in our legislature right now. So that may be his attempt to face the music that this really could pass even though he vetoes it. So he may want to be involved in actually crafting what's going to happen. So when you're calling him, keep that in mind as well, that it's a potential that he could veto it and they could still override his veto.
So that we're very clear in our opposition of this, can you help us understand who is for this and why they would be for this?
Well, Senator Argle is the one main sponsor of this bill, and he has been for a very long time. But there's also the PTCC, which is the main website. I probably have to look it up off today again, but there's a coalition that's out there basically too that's pushing for this. It's headed by a gentleman that's in Berks County that's a former talk radio host, is the one that came up with this. And he's the one that's been gaining support for it and has influenced these senators to go ahead with this bill. I know at one point the AARP was in favor of it. I haven't heard too much anymore about how they stand on it right now. And also the main realtors were in favor of it at one point as well. So, but I haven't heard anything in the news from them lately. That was the early goings on this when it first came out. So, but it's a lot of the senators that are out in the Western County are for it. It's slowly trickling our way. There's a couple coalitions that are out here, and like I said, Berks County certainly is one of them.
What do they stand to benefit?
The benefit is that they've been made to believe that this is eliminating their school property tax and is putting this money back in their pockets. But when I've looked at all these reports, it doesn't really do that. Like we've stated, there's, people aren't really investigating and looking into it, what their actual impact is. And like I said, you're going to wind up paying more taxes here or there, and there's going to be less money that goes into education.
Maybe I should go around it.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay, good. Okay.
I'm having a hard time understanding who was in favor of this, so that was it.
What's the logic?
So it's supposed to spread money to the four districts more evenly.
They're saying it's going to create an even playing field now for all the school districts inside of Pennsylvania. But obviously, if there's a deficit that's going to be run up, and like I said, the original numbers in this one report showed that we made $1 billion deficit right now. Nobody is benefiting from this. There's certain counties where they don't really rely on any of these taxes for their school districts, and that is out in that western side of Pennsylvania. So this has no impact really on them. It's more out towards eastern Pennsylvania and a couple others where we're really impacted by this.
I mean, if you look, obviously, school property tax, if you look, there is inequality. I mean, we can see that because, you can look at Radnor and you can look at, Chester, right? So we can see that there's inequality based on property taxes. So at first blush, this is a great idea from a social justice perspective. Like, yeah, okay. But, we have to, as we're doing tonight, looking a lot more deeply at this issue. It's not, black and white. And we really have to be able to examine it and say, look, it's not going to level the playing field. It's only going to make, unfortunately, I think what you've learned, James, and what we've learned from Jeff Sultanic, our lawyer, is that you're still going to have very unequal playing fields. You're going to have, places like Reading and places that are really impoverished, really not benefiting, and having that playing field equally balanced. So at first blush, it's a nice idea, but as we're talking about it tonight, we can really see that there's a lot of problems. So.
Are you aware of any other states that have instituted a tax program similar to this in the past 2 to 5 years?
I'm not, but I will be the first to admit I'm not an expert on it. I'm starting to learn more about this, but I'm really not familiar state by state with. I know that a number of the states do still have property taxes similar to here. New Jersey, our neighbor, certainly does. New York does, and so forth. So I'm not really familiar with the numbers or what that looks like or other methodologies they might use. It's a great question.
Can you say more about what they do in Western Pennsylvania that's different from what we do?
No, I don't know a whole lot. I mean, I know their tax structure is a little different out there than it is here because there's not as many businesses out there than there are here. So they're already getting probably enough, and the population disparity too. a lot less densely populated out there. So their school districts aren't gonna be as large as they are out here and as numerous. And I think that's the main reason that it's not gonna impact out there as much as it does here. Where we have much more dense population that, for upkeep for education.
So they already get a smaller percentage?
They're probably already getting a smaller percentage, I would assume, but they obviously don't need as much with the smaller school district.
And they're not as reliant on the property taxes as we are in the more densely populated regions.
What do they use?
A lot of them get state aid and state funding, especially in the Farm Belt areas. They get additional subsidies as a result of that. So that's what they're essentially relying on. Don't forget, here in our district, our state aid is minimal. We get about $1.2 million in state aid. That's on a $55 million budget. And we get about, I think it's maybe $600,000 total from the federal government. So everything else comes from property taxes. That's how we fund everything in the district. Yes, Chris.
So you were mentioning that you go to superintendent's meetings, and for the most part, the majority of superintendents that are present are against what they're proposing. Is that what I'm understanding?
100% unanimous.
So, with the box just now being elected, and for the most part, our community, and I think much of Pennsylvania was against that and flooded calls to the senators, and from, I don't know how many people have called those offices, but busy signals, you couldn't leave messages. So right now, you're suggesting that we call, but that, I don't think that's an effective, it hasn't proven effective in the past. So my follow-up question to this is, we have teachers' unions, we don't have parent representation as far as collective families or collective residents. Does anybody know of any kind of organization that exists where families can join and present themselves as a collective group to argue against these legislators that are going to go ahead and put a vote for it? Because right now, we're just all independent people that are trying to make our voices heard, and there are roadblocks continuously put up against us, and it looks like it's pretty much going to pass. So we have to think very quickly how we can come together to fight this more effectively. So does anyone have any thoughts on that?
There's a state TTO, I believe, and you have EEHSP, and you've got your, you can look through the current homeschool partnership that we have here. You can get in touch with the leaders of the EEHSP, and as well as the parent and teacher group for the middle school and high school. I believe there might be a state parent-teacher organization. I'm not sure. Can look to that. But I know that faxing senators, writing snail mail to them, those are other ways that are very effective.
Yeah.
Postcards are effective because from what I've understood, I've been sending a lot of postcards on other issues. But they can file mail because it can be held out to be inspected, but postcards go directly to them. We're inundating them, and so if we can all just write 3 a week.
Yeah, that is a wonderful suggestion. And the one thing that I will say, in addition to banding together in coalitions, is the numbers are important to them, how many people they hear from. So when your individual voices are heard and individually you're sending postcards or faxes or whatever, then those numbers are logged in and their assistants are charting that. And at any time, a representative or a senator may ask, how many people did we hear from on this issue today? Or their assistant is responsible for going to them and actually telling them the count and saying, well, we had 58 people today who sent postcards in about whatever the topic is. So I think there's an advantage to doing it individually as well as through groups and coalitions.
I also think it's important, and I'm part of a group that, we've started a group that meets every Thursday to try to tackle issues like this. And one thing that we've come up with is positive reinforcement with the people who actually do support the things that we support. And we've gotten positive feedback from them when we call them and they say, what, you're not calling to yell at us? Nobody ever does that. So if we can do that too, it takes a lot of time. This is all so overwhelming, everything that's going on. But if you
I want to just clarify, because you brought up DeVos, this is a state issue, so you want to be contacting your state representatives, not your federal.
Just want to clarify.
And they might not be getting the calls that the federal government is, and they may be more receptive, I mean, they might not be used to getting, inundated, so, we can keep making those calls, and I think that, Christine, your point is really important, that we do need to stay, and provide positive commentary, but I think we do need to act quickly, and I think, as much as we can rally together, I think also spreading the word as much as you possibly can. I know I have posted on Facebook, I'm not on there very much, but, post as much as you can, reach out to the EEHSP on their website, on other websites. I've been on the, Pennsylvania State Education Association, this was like a month ago, saying what are you guys doing about it? Trying to get lobbying those big organizations to start doing what they need to do too to support this issue. So, just being strategic is important.
Can we start with an e-blast to all the parents here, rather than having it be in the, I think it was the newsletter or something?
It went out through eBlast to all the schools.
It was just part of the regular emails that we get.
So you're talking, I'm sorry, so you're talking about a separate one? Yeah, actually, we can send out the facts, okay? And
We'll do a blast of just this.
we'll do the blast. I'm happy to do that as well. Pardon me? Oh, yes, thank you. And we'll give it the right title as well, the Independence Act and the dates.
Maybe the deadline dates and, who numbers for people to contact.
We absolutely will do that. I'll put Governor Wolf's information on here as well as some of the other.
On the district website.
Yeah.
Would that be helpful?
Great idea, yeah.
And if you'd be willing to share that, once we make this great thing for our district, if you'd be willing to share that with administrators in other districts, because what I've heard is that our representatives care about people who are going to vote for them, but they don't care about calls from people who are not going to be voting for
Right,
them.
that's true.
So if with your connections in other school districts, perhaps if you're like, hey, here, share our handout, get this out to your people, then that would maybe spread the word to people who could call other representatives who actually care to hear from
The
them.
good news is, at least, and I can speak to Montgomery County specifically, we actually have a legislative liaison who's an attorney. She used to be school board president in the Cheltenham School District. She sends these blasts out to us weekly, so we are apprised of any upcoming legislation. She's been very proactive about giving us updated information about this. So we all get that information as soon as it does come out, which is great. The other thing that I've seen from a number of school districts, and I actually shared with our board members in their packets for this evening, are resolutions from a number of the school boards across the state in all areas of the state, which basically say resolved, we're against this. And they may list all of the points in terms of the rationale as to why in the resolution, but then it's a signed resolution. So I know it had come up among some of our board members. I gave them some samples of those resolutions so they can take a look at the wording, and that's something that certainly the board can consider.
Yeah, hopefully they'll send that out to their people too, so the parents can be making calls in those districts.
Exactly. And it suggests to me that if the boards are adopting resolutions, then they're publicizing it within the district. Yes, back there. Sure. Petitions are great as well. Again, I think the best route is the individual route. I think my experience in looking at petitions is sometimes they get, as we know with school board elections, people challenge them and say, well, they just passed it around at a meeting. People really didn't know what they were signing. You hope that's not the case. So I think they're good and they have a valid way of getting a point across. But again, I think the best way is individual inundation. If you can remember those two words, yes.
I just wanted to add, it's slightly off topic, but in conjunction with all of this, I think it's even more concerning when you consider, we're talking about Betsy DePosit, it's not, that this is a state issue, but when you consider the fact that they're thinking of block granting Medicaid, that's even less, that's going to be coming in. And so two together, it's even more.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because that's the latest information that we got from our legislative liaison, Tina Valletto, today, was about the blocking of the Medicaid grant and how it might impact our access funds. Access funds are federal funds that come down through the state and help reimburse some of the extraordinary costs that we have for special education. So what we're being told is those access funds are going to be severely decreased if this goes through. Yes, Michael.
I think we also need to get in contact with groups that you belong to that actually support this bill. Like if you belong to ARP, they are a big supporter of this and putting a lot of money behind this. You have to let them know that you are not, if you're giving them money and supporting them, your money is going to fight against you. So
That's a great point, Michael. And just a reminder, ARP, the American Association of Retired People, you only have to be 50 years old and you don't have to be retired to join. So, a lot of us probably in the room are at or close to 50 or much older than 50 and have seen it for a long time. So I just want to point that out. It sounds like it's a retired old folks association, but it's really not. Yes.
Looking at the school district as a whole, we mentioned AARP. What percentage of our township draws funds from the elderly who've raised their kids and they've moved out and are being here who would be 100% for this? Because, sorry, my in-laws, they would be happy not to have to pay school taxes anymore. They paid for their kids. They don't want to pay anymore. So they're all in for that. So in a ratio, what is the percentage of parents who have children in the community, percentage of children coming in versus the percentage of parents who have done their deed and feel like they're done?
I honestly don't know.
They don't care. They don't want to pay for turf. They don't want to pay
Yeah, the only thing I can tell you for sure is I can look at the numbers of the kids coming into the district. And I actually just did a presentation about our upcoming construction and renovations projects at Rotary today. And what I showed them very clearly is in the past decade alone, Erdenheim school population has increased. Now, obviously, it wasn't Erdenheim all 10 years, so we're kind of taking a long look back. But between Enfield's population is up now about 28% in the last decade. Erdenheim is about 35%, and what we're looking at is that grade span, not the school necessarily. The middle school is inching up there. It's about 19%, and the high school is so far it's a little bit flat. It's going to take a couple of years before all these kids filter through. But even our district population from a couple of years ago, 6-7 years ago, was 2,000. It's close to 2,500, right? It's about 2,550 right now. So we are increasing by leaps and bounds. So while I can't, unfortunately, answer your direct question in terms of school-age children, parents in the district, I can tell you we are getting more and more children every single day, flooding literally into the district from all over, not just from within the township where births may be relatively stable, but moving in from other communities because they want to be in Springfield Township to raise their children.
Can I make a quick point?
Yeah.
I would just say, if you run into anybody that's in our township that might be all for this, that's of retirement age, remind them, educate them that the property tax really doesn't go away because of the outstanding debt. That's what a lot of people have a misconception
That's the
for.
fighting point.
I would bring up the point to them, it sounds great, but what they're presenting isn't true, because the outstanding debt is still there. It's going to take at least 10 years to pay it off. You're still going to be paying that tax.
And you're gonna pay for everything else.
And you're going to pay for more taxes on clothing and other items that we were never ever taxed on before.
Does it affect their welfare? Not welfare, their Medicare checks?
Tell them it does. Alternate truth, right?
It doesn't matter if the amount of money coming in, if they're paying a higher percentage on
think of food
And they have to eat.
Food and clothing right now is zero. We pay zero here. I mean, it's a lovely thing that we as a state feel that that's a basic need, right? But that's going away.
7%.
7% from 0 to 7%. Okay, so
Your
that's
kids are gonna have to wear hands.
Just to be clear, I just want to clear something. Property tax does not go away, but it does get reduced. So the taxes that will remain are the taxes that are required to pay the principal and interest payments.
Mr. King, do you know what percentage?
About
that is?
15%.
So it'd be 150 per thousand? So if you're paying 1,000 in taxes now, you'd be paying 150.
Median assessed income is about 150,000. You'd still be paying about $740 out of a little less than I guess, $5,000 tax bill. Something like
But-
15%.
But it is also possible the homestead rebate program could go away.
Yeah, I asked about that. Everybody just went.
Yeah, nobody's really talking about that, and that means the money coming in to offset property taxes through that program, which was the casino revenue, which was supposed to continually increase and never did, that'll go away as well.
Which is an interesting point, because the gambling funds have gone up, but the amount that they give out for allocation to reduce taxes has remained the same. So who's getting the rest of that? Yeah. So who's going
Christine.
to get the rest of this one?
What's our plan B?
Well, the problem is, and I think this is really one of the major problems with this proposal, is we don't have a plan B because we have no idea how this will impact us. So it's virtually impossible to plan ahead. If this passes and goes into effect as of July 1, we have no clue. We have no idea how much money we're going to be getting. So we're preparing a budget now, but we don't know whether or not that budget will be meaningless. We have no idea when we will get money into our district coffers. Right now, as Ken mentioned, it generally comes in. People are pretty good about paying their taxes here between August and October. So we know pretty early on that we've collected over 90% of our property tax revenue, and we can, as Ken said, invest it as we go along and earn interest on that money. We have no way of knowing when we will be getting that money or how much it is. So unfortunately, I wish I could tell you there's a plan B, but we wouldn't even know how to plan around this.
And I think the track record for state-funded and state-managed education programs in recent years has shown that budget revenue comes in very late indeed, if not after a lot of these schools' years start. So you get teachers not knowing when they're going to get paid.
They can't manage their own money at the state level and pass a
And I don't mean
budget
to
on
denigrate
time.
the state on that. We live in a great commonwealth, but that has been the track record with state-managed education in the state.
One of my big concerns is, because I've been involved for 6 years on the board and as a parent before that, is we do have a need for construction in this district. We have aging buildings, we're full, we're bursting at the seams, and this would actually bring it to a screeching halt. Nothing. We can't borrow any more money. We can't build without a referendum. So, we have kids that have a need for better facilities right now, and those plans would just go right out the window.
And just to follow up on that, because we have a very solid tax base in the township and we do have stable revenue and stable expenditures each year, we have a very high tax rating. So Moody's and all the other clubs, or not clubs, sorry, rating institutions which give us a triple A rating and so forth, enable us to go out for debt. We're able to do that because of what we've built up in the district over time. And it's that level of stability that will now become instability, which we're also very fearful of. Yes, Angie?
Where do the teachers' unions stand on all this? I mean, are they hopefully making a big fuss about this?
What I've heard is that they're very much against it because they're very concerned about, same thing, instability, how will they get paid, which is exactly what was just mentioned. And look, they have a vested interest, obviously, in school districts being stable as well, aside from their own pocketbooks.
So are teachers calling in the district? Are they being encouraged by the principal to call and do stuff?
We have not yet done that within the school. We've left it to PSEA, but that's certainly a tack that we can take, is to educate our own teachers, and hopefully other districts will do the same thing so that they will begin to become proactive. And interestingly enough, we have a very large percentage of individuals who are employees of this school district who live in this school district. And even though it's a Commonwealth issue, doesn't matter where in the state you live, it affects all school districts. It's certainly, they have a vested interest in Springfield Township and what this will mean for us. So that's a great point. We can certainly do that. Yes,
I just want
Anita.
to reassure you, I teach in a different school district, and at our last faculty meeting, this was brought up. To make us aware. Make us aware. No, she just said
Yes, Chris.
This is like kind of thinking outside the box. Is there a way to get kids involved with this, students? Like, and I don't know if that's a right thing to do or not, but get them to tweet. Like, I don't know, like just, hey, I don't know.
So our official position as a school district is that we cannot, unfortunately, encourage or allow students through our influence to do those things, but you certainly can as parents.
I think, well, you brought up a wonderful point. I'm going for Janine. No, she did. They're not voters. So I think if you think about the bigger issue, this tends to benefit older people who don't have a direct benefit from the schools. We all, at least most of us in here, have kids, I assume in Springfield schools. So I think on average, we're all against this proposal. I think the people to reach out are the people who are benefiting from this, which is the older population, like you're no good parents.
They love their grandchildren. No sign on the dotted line.
I'm sorry. No, but I think maybe if you can get the older population to reach out to the state senators and then the state representatives, I think that might have more of an impact than kids sending stuff, because that's who's really benefiting from it.
Kids call your parents.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have 3 lovely children and bombard
Is this the on party lines? I just need to know. Is this party line? Is
No,
this like,
it's bipartisan. I make a point of bringing that up every time because I think it's real important to bring it up. This is a non-partisan issue. There has been support, unfortunately, from both sides. So we cannot take any type of aim at any party here. There's both sides of the party.
You've got more credibility if you don't.
I think it's more economics. I mean, if you're older, you're more likely to be on a fixed income or limited funds, and it's a very appealing thing to support.
I think another population are the parents who are already paying tuition to private schools. If you're paying tuition to private school, why should I be funding public school kids?
That's
Even if they're wealthy and have money, everyone wants to save money.
They like using our facilities and buses.
We'll charge them for bus trips.
Yeah, and that is a wonderful point, is that they are not only utilizing our facilities and our fields, which they are playing on, but of course we do pay for transportation. We bus to over 90 public, private, and parochial schools throughout the region. 90 every single day.
We have friends who send their kids to private school and they say, oh, it'd be great, I'm not paying for tuition. We need to know to bring that up to them. Correct. That your kids are, if this goes through, it's going to affect them too. Yes. Even going to the private school.
And your food bill's gonna go up 7%.
If you do call your older folk that think that this is a good idea, I think you should remind them that it's, in terms of framing the situation, it would be the same thing as people that live in a school district that don't have kids or haven't had kids yet saying, well, I don't have kids, so, they were young once and had kids, and they benefited from the people before them. It's really simple, but they forget. They're out of perspective, but they might need to be reminded gently that they were young once too, and somebody else paid for them.
And I think we all recognize, I believe, that there's a residual benefit within the community when you have a well-educated group of children coming through your schools. No one wants their property values to decline. Forget property taxes. It's how much can you sell your home for in a community that does not maintain an excellent school system. And as I mentioned before, I think what is drawing people into Springfield Township is the fact that it's a wonderful community in which to live. We provide a wonderful education. We say it all the time. We provide a private school education at a public school price. So, you know, people come here because of the schools. And without money to fund those schools, everybody in the entire township is going to suffer. No one will want to come to move into a community that doesn't maintain an excellent school system. So that affects everyone. Michael.
I think where the taxes money is coming from is a losing argument. Because if you try to explain to somebody that everybody should pay their property tax, well, for years all I've been hearing is it should be shifted away from people on fixed income to the people who can afford to pay. So let's go with an income tax where it's a percentage. And the people who make more can afford to pay more. The people on fixed income should be burdened with a higher property tax that's going up, where their income is going down. I think that's a losing argument. I think the winning argument here is going to say that the money's going to the state. It's not going to our district.
Correct.
Our district's losing control of how they spend their money, and by doing that, they're losing control of where their money is, where their resources are going to be utilized. That they're not going to be able to make up the decision that, you know what, we need new school books, we need to build a new equipment, we need to purchase this, or we need to purchase that. They're going to be delegated to the state saying, you know what, you used to know how much money you're getting, but you know what, this year Philadelphia needs more money, so we're going to shift more money to Philadelphia. You're only going to get 80% of what you thought you were going to get. And we're going to have to make cuts that are going to affect our students and our community that are not going to be in the control of our district.
Mention all businesses getting tax cuts.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Corporations are all gonna be getting tax cuts.
They're off the hook. They're off the hook.
It's a lot easier to manage tax expenditures for a large property owner, such as a property management group who owns 10,000 apartment units. It's a lot easier for me to manage income tax and cuts against loss and in accounting than it is to say, okay, this property's worth X amount, we're hitting you for X amount. This was big. 4 or 5 years ago, the city of Philadelphia did a major property reevaluation on apartment buildings specifically, and I work adjacent to that industry, and you know, I can see very much how it's to their benefit to manage their taxation on an income and a state tax rather than a lump sum property tax. So, you know, these are the kind of decisions that, you know, the businesses are making that are getting behind these
And property taxes do fluctuate according to assessments, whereas when you say, well, we're changing the personal income tax from this amount to this amount, it's set. Yeah.
They got whacked 100%.
Yes.
Once there's an update on or this is getting reintroduced, these bills, I guess. So once that happens, will there be like kind of a communication about the alignment of this assessment?
Exactly. What we're going to do is, and I'll take responsibility for this tomorrow, actually, I'll do the research, get all the information, change the name, change the dates, make sure I get the accurate information so we can update the fact sheet. We'll get it out to parents along with a little note as to why we're sending it and what it's all about and so forth. We heard a number of wonderful suggestions, including also talking to our staff members, making sure they're apprised of the issue. And we'll remind people to send those postcards, letters, faxes, emails, and we'll put the addresses and other information on here as well.
I don't know how many people here are on the What's Happening in Springfield Township Facebook page. So I'm a James Taylor, posts in there all the time. So as soon as I get another update, I will also post it out on there. I usually want to post these issues out there with as much information I can as well. So some of these websites that I mentioned tonight, I'll try to get those up there, you know, as soon as I can for that as well.
Yes.
What's the name of the
get there. There's 2 new reports that they put out, short ones that were requested some of the senators. One actually just came out in January, and you'll see one older one past that from last year, and you have to go back, I think, about 4 pages to actually get this full report. It's cited a lot. And the other one was Pennsylvania Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Their website is www.picpa.org. They have an article on there that talks about it. And they actually discuss the impact on some of the other districts that we were talking about, like how the impact's not what they think about, making it even playing field. And the last one that I had to report out was the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. And they are penbpc.org.
I was just going to say, if you send them to me, I'll make sure they go out on the blast as well. Okay, so we'll include that. Yes.
I'd just like to say it's very important that once this fact sheet comes out, you share it with all your neighbors. Because a lot of people don't have time to make it to meetings like this. There's, if you have any retired homeowners next to you, share that. And explain that the numbers don't add up. It's not going to be as rosy as just paying your property.
The most interesting thing I found was when I finally found this independent fiscal office report, was this is the main one that's used that they cite saying that it thinks the plan is good. But the person that's pushing it cites just little snippets here and there. And when you read it in the full context, it's not what they're saying. So, like I said, the first thing pleasing to me was that it actually was enacted back then. At this point, we have $1 billion deficit in Pennsylvania for education. So that's in this report that they cite saying it's good. It's not.
I think what's important to, at least I did it, is just a quick back of the envelope calculation. It is tax time, so go through that. It'll take you 10 minutes if you can pull your records, and you'll see how much less tax, at least for our family, we're going to pay. So, I don't know where you're going to get your money.
Hence the problem.
I don't mind paying local tax. I really don't. To me, it makes the most sense. I live here.
Do you want his address?
I actually want to just remind all of you that we are elected board. You all elected us. We are taxpayers in the district making decisions on your behalf of how your taxes are going to be used. If that's taken away, that point was made before, that's it. We have no control over what the money is going to be used for.
We're gonna get rid of the school board? I mean, you guys are gonna not have any power to do anything?
You'll just be able to yell at us and we won't care.
Well, is that any different?
And on that note,
That was good. Find out where he lives.
so on that note, we all very sincerely thank you for coming out and for responding to the messages that went out. We will continue to get the message out with accurate information. And if you have additional ideas or recommendations, please let me hear them. Let us hear them. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Great discussion. We appreciate it.